Our story begins aboard the second Death Star as Luke Skywalker is being electrocuted by Darth Sidious. The Emperor is pouring sheets of blue tendrils right into Luke, and in the Force, Luke could still feel the despair of the rebellion outside of this battle station. Down on the forest moon of Endor, Han, Leia, Chewie, and the rebel group have all been eliminated by the Empire. The forest was being burned away. The Ewoks were fleeing to safety, knowing they have lost. In space, the Executor tore through Admiral Akbar's ship as the Death Star was firing into the others. Everything has gone terribly wrong, and as Luke writhed in pain, he called out for his father. But Anakin was truly dead. There was nothing left of him inside of Vader, and as Luke's life was slipping away, Vader turned away from him, staring out of the viewport as the Rebel Alliance crumbled into nothing. Darth Sidious continued laughing as he lifted Luke up with the Force, and then threw him down into the reactor shaft to his certain death. Luke Skywalker fell, barely alive, and he accepted that this was it. This was the end of the line. He has failed. Luke closed his eyes, expecting death to find him, but instead, everything would go quiet as Luke found himself opening his eyes in an entirely different world. Luke felt the Force surrounding him as he looked around, seeing stars and some sort of portals for as far as the eye could see, until he heard a voice. It was Ben Kenobi, and the old Jedi Master told Luke that he has lost. Once again, the Empire has emerged victorious. The dark side was too strong, but there is still a way. Ben would explain to Luke that his timeline is lost. Luke is dead, along with his friends. But here, in this mysterious plane of the Force, they can rewrite history in another timeline. Luke would follow Ben along these paths, as Ben told Luke all about Order 66, the fall of the Jedi, and the rise of Darth Sidious, aided by the fall of Anakin Skywalker. And Ben told Luke that he now has a chance to make sure the Empire never comes to be. If he accepts this mission, he will be sent to a time just before the Empire rose. He will have a chance to truly change things. Luke asked why he is being given this chance, and Ben said that Darth Sidious has become a poison to the Force. His darkness is unnatural, and as he pursues the abilities to become immortal and gain access to the world between worlds, the Force is beginning to push back. Luke Skywalker, son of the Chosen One, is who the Force has deemed worthy of this mission, and although Luke still didn't understand fully, he wanted nothing more than to fix this tragedy that just occurred in his time. So he told Ben he will go, and Ben would wish for the Force to be with Luke, as everything would begin to fade into a bright white light. Luke soon would find himself on a street, surrounded by buildings taller than any he ever would have imagined. He was on Coruscant for the first time, and although Luke has learned a ton about this planet, he never truly saw it with his own eyes. But something strange was happening here. Buildings were on fire, alarms were ringing out all around him, and Luke would suddenly hear an explosion ripping high up in the clouds. Luke climbed around a building to see a giant starship that has been split in half, descending down to the planet's surface. Luke knew that whoever was inside of this ship was facing certain death, as even he would not be able to land something as broken as that. He wondered if it was even possible to help, but soon Luke watched as somehow, miraculously, this half a ship actually steadied itself in the air, and although it would crash land into the ground, it was the safest possible landing spot. Luke ran through the giant city, getting over to the landing strip where this ship just landed, and Luke was prepared to go and help the survivors get out when he was suddenly frozen in place. He saw Ben Kenobi stumble his way out of the ship, brushing hair out of his face as he turned and smiled to the others inside. The next to exit was none other than Emperor Palpatine himself, except he looked different, so much younger, and without the gray scars Luke was familiar with. Luke was filled with fear as he saw him, and Palpatine seemed to sense something as he looked in Luke's direction, but Luke hid himself just in time. When he finally turned back to the ship, he saw the third person, and although Luke didn't recognize the young man exiting the ship, he could tell this man exuded an aura of power. Luke then watched as some sort of gunship landed by them, and a group of Jedi Masters exited. They greeted Obi-Wan, Palpatine, and then they said the name Anakin. Again, Luke was frozen. That was his father. That is the man who turns against the galaxy and caused the rise of the Empire. Luke couldn't believe it, and as the group took off in the gunship, Luke would find an abandoned speeder following them through Coruscant. As Luke flew it, it was hard to keep his eye on the flight path. Every building was the most beautiful building he's ever seen. The amount of people here was overwhelming. Luke knew from his talks with Leia that Coruscant had at least 1 trillion citizens, but seeing that in person, it was impossible to describe for him. Luke couldn't even fathom growing up here as a Jedi, but as he turned a corner, he saw the most beautiful building of them all, the Jedi Temple. In the beauty of all of it, Luke lost the gunship he was following, so he decided to just go and check out the temple. All of this felt so unreal. It was distracting Luke from everything that happened in his original timeline. Leia, Han, Lando, Chewie, all of his friends were gone. only he remained. Luke would once more hide those feelings away, knowing that he could fix it all if he just succeeds here. He would land his speeder inside of the temple hangar, and a group of soldiers wearing white and blue armor approached Luke, asking him to identify himself. Luke just showed his lightsaber, saying he lost his Jedi robes in battle here. The clones nodded, and Luke would walk into the temple, grabbing a robe that was laying near the entrance, looking down into the grand hall to see something he only imagined before. Hundreds of Jedi just all walking around. The Force was so strong here. It was peaceful, even with a dark cloud hanging over the galaxy. And across Coruscant, Jedi Master Mace Windu was meeting up with Anakin and Palpatine as the Chancellor was safely returned to the city. Windu would learn that Dooku was dead, and soon Anakin would meet up with Padme to learn that she was pregnant. It was a truly happy moment for the both of them, as they knew they would spend their lives together with this child. And back in the Jedi Temple, Luke Skywalker continued walking the halls, with his amazement never ceasing. He saw just how different his Jedi training was, as Luke walked past training rooms, a room full of giant fountains, meditation halls. He saw younglings training together. It was all so wonderful. But as Luke walked these halls, pretending to be a part of this Jedi Order, one Jedi Master would sense something. Grand Master Yoda could feel Luke in the Force, as he was quite powerful, and Luke hadn't exactly mastered the ability to hide his presence. Yoda followed Luke through the temple, watching as the boy examined the rooms, and Yoda couldn't figure out what was going on here. Eventually, Luke found himself in front of an elevator. He recalled seeing the Grand Tower while approaching the temple. Curiosity would get the best of Luke. He ascended the elevator, all the way up to the Jedi Council chambers. Once inside, Luke would look to each of the chairs, and he made his way to the window, looking out at the planet. For a moment, everything seemed to be still in the galaxy, but then the doors opened. Luke turned to the elevator to see the only other Jedi that he actually recognized, Yoda. Luke said his name, and Yoda felt a touch of recognition deep inside of himself as he asked the boy who he was. Luke said he had a lot of explaining to do, so perhaps it's best that they both sit. So young Skywalker would take a seat, and he would do his best to tell Yoda the full truth, hoping the old master would believe him. Luke said he is the son of Anakin Skywalker. He was trained by Obi-Wan Kenobi, along with Yoda himself on Dagobah. Luke said that he was the last of the Jedi after he and Kenobi were killed, as the Empire rose in their defeat. Luke talked for a long time, and for the entire time, Yoda just sat completely still. When Luke finished by telling Yoda about how he lost, how the Emperor and Vader killed him and he was sent here, Yoda closed his eyes without a word. And after about 5 minutes of this silence, Luke stood up, and Yoda finally opened his eyes, telling Luke that the Force is their ally, and they will use this gifted opportunity to ensure that the same future does not come to pass here. But he told Luke there is one thing that he must know. When Padme gives birth to the twins, he will cease to exist. Since he will be reborn as the son to Anakin and Padme, this version of him will become one with the Force, most likely joining Ben Kenobi in the plane of existence that he just found him in. For Luke, this was tough to grapple with, but after a moment, he would realize that this was for the best. This was not his timeline. He was here to save this galaxy, and he knew the newer version of Luke would get to live a great life so long as he succeeds in the end. And so, Yoda told Luke that he has someone for him to meet. At this point, Yoda had all of the secrets of the galaxy. He knew Palpatine was Sidious. He knew the Jedi were somehow going to be wiped out, but it was still a mystery as to how that was going to happen. And Yoda now knew for certain that Anakin was married to Padme, and Anakin was the father of her 2 children. So Yoda would bring Luke across the city all the way to Padme Amidala's apartment, where Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala were settling in after Anakin has returned from rescuing Palpatine. As they were seated out on the balcony together, Anakin's heart would drop as Yoda arrived, and with him was a mysterious younger Jedi. Luke looked upon Anakin and Padme, seeing his parents for the first time in his entire life. Sure, he'd seen Vader before, but never under the mask, and Luke didn't have the words to even begin explaining what was going on. But luckily, Yoda was understanding just how dire the entire situation was, and just how little time they may have. Any punishment for Anakin marrying Padme could be reserved for a later date, if ever, as that was by far the least of their worries right now. Yoda would try to calmly explain everything, as Luke stood behind him, and when Anakin and Padme had the truth, they honestly couldn't believe it. Anakin couldn't see a world where he turns against everything he's ever known, and lost Padme and the children, but Luke was living proof. He knew things about Vader, about Obi-Wan, and he told Anakin that he was sent here to make sure he never makes those same mistakes again. Eventually, Padme would decide to accept this. Ironically, her lack of understanding of the Force actually made her more open to the idea of Luke time traveling here. As for Anakin and Yoda, it was harder to grasp because they thought they knew so much about the Force, when in reality, they've barely scratched the surface as Jedi. Anakin was truly seeing that the dark side was never the way. The light was so powerful that even when the dark wins, the Force fights back by sending Luke here. Padme would get up in front of Luke, looking him up and down with a longing smile on her face, as if she knew that she missed raising him. She was proud of this Luke, and even though she never truly knew him, she could see Anakin's kind eyes in the young boy. She asked what must be done, and Yoda said it is quite simple in the end. They must defeat Darth Sidious together. They would ultimately decide that this is something they must wait until the following morning to do, as the sun was setting, and Yoda wanted to speak with Windu to make sure the Jedi were prepared to handle the political responsibility that would fall on their shoulders if the Chancellor falls at their hands. Although Palpatine is a Sith, most members of the galaxy trust him far more than they trust the Jedi, and they will need to bring proof to show that Palpatine is truly behind everything. And, unfortunately, presenting a Jedi claiming to be a time traveler to the Senate wouldn't exactly go over too well. Luke would spend the evening with his parents, and although Anakin had a million questions all about the Empire that he helped to create, he would instead just try to focus on the here and the now. Padme would tell Luke all about his extended family that he never got to meet, and Anakin would be able to just rave about his mother, how much he loved her, how great of a Jedi Master Obi-Wan has been to him. Luke would end up sleeping in the Jedi Temple, as this was his preferred option. It allowed him to just continue trying to center himself in the Force in this new world, and being alone in the temple allowed Luke to just really feel how strange this all was. It was hard to comprehend, and as Luke began to enter a bit of a panic as the weight of expectations closed in around him, he felt a new presence in his room, though the door never opened. Instead, he just heard the voice of a Jedi Master that introduced himself as Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon explained that he was the Jedi who eventually goes on to teach Yoda and Kenobi how to manifest themselves in the Force in Luke's original timeline. Obviously, that has not yet happened, but Qui-Gon did not exist in the present. He was part of the Force Netherworld, going between the past and the future, and Luke's emergence into this timeline was no surprise to Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon would help Luke to calm down about all of this, and he would tell Luke that it's natural to be afraid of dying, as Luke was going to disappear from this reality as soon as Padme gives birth to the twins. But Luke told Qui-Gon he's not afraid of death. He's afraid of failing these Jedi, these people, just like he failed his friends on the Death Star. Luke continued by saying he doesn't have the Jedi training for these expectations. He was raised on a moisture farm for all of his life, but Qui-Gon told Luke that is what makes him so valuable. The rest of these Jedi here on Coruscant all grew up in the Jedi Temple without any experience in the outside galaxy. Many of them have become blind to the reality of what is going on. A Sith Lord was able to rise to power right under their noses, and in order to bring him down, a miracle may be needed. Luke Skywalker is the miracle the galaxy needs. He is more than capable of this. All of this would help Luke to settle in. He would finally be able to get a few hours of sleep. Across the great city, Anakin would not sleep at all. He stayed up all night, angry at himself for what he became in Luke's galaxy, and the more he thought, the angrier he became at Palpatine. For all of his years as a Jedi, no one has been a greater mentor to him than Palpatine. Anakin was seeing now that it was all a ploy to eventually bring him to the dark side. He wanted nothing more than to march over to Palpatine's apartment, kill him right now. But luckily, Padme would wake up, finding Anakin stressing out, and she would help him calm down, like Qui-Gon did with Luke. The two Skywalkers were heavily on edge, knowing that the fate of the galaxy was in their hands. Yoda would spend the night meeting with Mace Windu, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and other council members, doing his best to explain the situation with Luke. He still did not fully understand it himself, but Yoda was adamant in saying that the Force has sent them a clear warning. They would be foolish to brush this off. All of the Jedi would accept that Luke was here to help them, and when morning came around, Luke Skywalker would find himself standing in front of the Jedi Council. He would explain everything for himself, making Yoda's claims seem much more truthful, and Windu would decide they can waste no more time. A squad must be assembled immediately to go and take down the Sith Lord Darth Sidious. Windu would decide that he, Yoda, Kit Fisto, and Luke will go together, but Luke would tell the council that he is not doing this without Anakin. Despite what Anakin became in Luke's timeline, Luke knew he was good deep down. He always could feel it, and being here with Anakin just affirmed his thoughts on the matter. Windu would begrudgingly agree. He would try to argue that Anakin does turn to the dark side in the other timeline, so perhaps bringing him right to Palpatine is not a great idea. But deep down, Windu knew that Anakin would find his way there anyways. So the group would soon head over, while Jedi Masters Obi-Wan Kenobi, Kit Fisto, and Saesee Tin would work on making sure the Jedi Temple was heavily secured, in case Palpatine tried something. They knew now that the Jedi were wiped out in Luke's time, so they must be ready. And across Coruscant, Palpatine was just getting to his office in the morning when the Jedi squad would arrive. Standing at the front of this group was someone he did not recognize. It was a Jedi, sort of resembling Anakin, that wore black clothes, not like traditional Jedi robes. The Jedi group of Luke, Anakin, Yoda, and Windu would ignite their lightsabers, and Palpatine somehow knew this mysterious Jedi has exposed him. There was only one option now: fight these Jedi, kill them all. Yoda would move first into this attack, darting in like a green blur, strikes precise, fast, striking at the Sith Lord. Mace Windu followed in, his own blade hammering down in sharp arcs with each swing, forcing Palpatine to shift back as Anakin pressed forward with his own heavy slashes, his power driving through the Chancellor's defenses. Luke's style was clashing with all of theirs. He was not trained in the traditional Jedi arts. The other three had to adapt to Luke's wide spins, sudden lunges kicked between swings, a rhythm that didn't make much sense to the Jedi, but this odd style, mixing with the Jedi's traditional styles, forced Palpatine to adapt as well. The fight would surge through the office, and Sidious soon found an opening to separate these Jedi. A crack of lightning would surge from Palpatine's hands, blasting the windows apart, and then using the Force to hurl the unsuspecting Yoda and Windu out into the night. They would survive for sure, but Sidious just needed to separate the Jedi for now. Shards of glass were cutting through the air as Luke stumbled backwards, just for Anakin to catch him by the shoulder, pulling him forward again. Now it was father and son, and despite not truly knowing each other, they moved together instinctively. Luke's erratic strikes were creating openings, and Anakin read these gaps instantly, snapping into them with clean swings of his blade. Palpatine snarled, driving at Luke, who barely held his ground, with clumsy spinning parries, and Anakin stepped in to lock blades with the Sith, pressing forward with his own strength, until Luke kicked Palpatine square in the chest, sending him staggering backwards. Together, the two of them continued to attack Sidious as Anakin drove through the middle with raw power. Sidious struck back again and again, but each time, one of the Skywalkers would get in his way, and finally, Luke's blade would come down, forcing Palpatine to twist awkwardly to block. Anakin lunged in that moment, his strike cutting through the Sith defenses, driving his saber deep into Palpatine's chest. Luke followed with a sharp, horizontal slash, disarming the Sith, sending his blade spinning into the glass and out into the night. Sidious collapsed, falling dead to the floor. Father and son would stand together, as Luke helped to secure victory this time. Luke Skywalker would not stick around for the politics that would follow. In the aftermath of it all, he would once more stand with the Jedi Council, helping them to see where everything went wrong in his timeline. The Jedi would understand that change is necessary. They would see that moving away from politics was the move for them. And then, this Luke would go back to Padme's apartment to see Padme and Anakin together for one last time. They shared an evening together, and Luke would embrace every second of it. But when the time came, Luke would go off on his own, knowing his time was limited. Padme was set to give birth to the twins very soon, and once that happens, this version of Luke would cease to exist. So, Luke would set off to Tatooine, finding a spot close to where he grew up. He would sit in the sand and peacefully look at the twin suns, knowing his time here was a success. Across the galaxy, Padme would indeed give a safe birth to twins Luke and Leia, and the version of Luke that came to save them would disappear, becoming one with the Force. Luke would soon find himself in the world between worlds, with the ghosts that he knew, and Luke would get to see the future of this new timeline. He saw Anakin and Padme living their life, happy on Naboo. Luke would watch the new version of himself grow into an excellent Jedi, while Leia followed her mother into politics. Luke would see portals of Han, Chewbacca, Lando, as once more, they would all be able to find each other. Luke would see his friends living happily in their new lives, and as a Jedi in the world between worlds, he would always trust in the Force, as it helped him to fix his greatest failures in the end. And folks, that is our story for today. A time-traveling story. I haven't done one in a while. I've done one similar to this a while back where it was, I honestly don't even fully recall it. It was so long ago, but yeah, I really wanted to do a Luke Skywalker story and just a time travel story, so hey, mixed them together. It's fun to just kind of bring Luke to Coruscant as, I mean, it's a planet that would be extremely hard to comprehend, like actually being there and seeing everything. So I wanted to kind of emphasize that, Luke seeing this temple and this just Coruscant would be kind of nuts, and wanted to go through that, and then in the end, Palpatine fight. I wanted to have Luke and Anakin do it together. Luke gets to meet his mother, and just, yeah, I wanted it to end kind of with him seeing that everyone gets a happy life in the world between worlds, and wanted to start it with him losing, because I think that's, I don't know, it's kind of like in the Ahsoka show when she loses to Balin and ends up in the world between worlds. Obviously, she doesn't time travel, but we time traveled in this one, because why not? But anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.